welcome back. It's been a while. It's been almost a month since I recorded my last video. I've been busy all month and I just didn't have time to do any recording. And I wanted to do more recording in October, but I just didn't have time. But I wanted to do some videos for Veterans Day, and I think the best way to really appreciate Veterans Day is to learn the history, what the soldiers have gone through, and kind of just learn the history and the understanding how things got to where they got, and to appreciate how bad things happened, people came in, fixed it, and it got socially better. And so, and I love learning about history and everything, and so we're going to do the Oversimplified World War II video. And even though I did see these videos, I still have a lot to add to them, to really kind of like talk about, because I just love talking about history. So I think for my channel will be a lot of history stuff and culture things. And so for Veterans Day, I just wanted to do some videos for it. So let's get started. In 1902, by the way, I believe Queen Victoria died in 1902, or was it 1901? I don't remember. It was either one of those years. And my great-grandpa was 3 years old in 1902. He died when I was 7, and that was in the year 2000. So that's crazy that I heard and lived beside somebody that was 3 years old in that year. Incredible.
It's 1902. A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy to Switzerland to avoid military service. He gets big into socialism, working for trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police.
He did say violent overthrow monarchies. So I don't think it was in his best interest, best interest to make a political party and try to just have some way to get rid of the monarchy without war or any type of political violence. Probably a lot more difficult back then than it is today, but him wanting to do war to get rid of them, it's not good.
So he gets arrested, sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again, goes back to Italy again, completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he finally returns to work as an avid socialist. His speeches and journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists. He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested. Then
Yeah, but then he was anti-war. That's kind of weird dynamic. You want violent like violent overthrow of monarchies, but you were anti-war at the same time. I don't know if that's like a. I don't understand his thought process on that.
World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought, wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution everywhere. And suddenly he was pro-war, but his fellow socialists didn't like his new pro-war stance.
Yeah, because Italy was on the British and French side, and if Germany got down, Germany and Austria-Hungary got down into Italy and actually pushed them and collapsed the government of Italy, Italy wouldn't be a country though. It would be part of Austria-Hungary, and probably Corsica exist at the time? No, I don't think so. I think that was still part of Austrian-Hungary. Yeah, but they're like a big, like 25% or 30% of the country would be Austria-Hungary. Then your monarchy in Italy got overthrown, but doesn't belong to Italy anymore.
So they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what? I'm done with socialism. We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian peoples, just like the days of the Roman Empire. I'll call it fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. That's all well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you? Let's go with bold.
What a very unserious person.
Italy had been on the winner's side in World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end, they only got a little, and they felt cheated. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that the Italian people were a little unhappy. So when Mussolini came along and said that he could fix everything, his fascist movement gained a lot of support. In 1922, he went to the king and said, make me prime minister, or I'll make me prime minister. And the king said, you and what army? This army. Fair enough. Then he went about establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had its first fascist dictator. Next up, Germany. Germany had been on the loser's side, and they got absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of Versailles. They lost territory, had to demilitarize the Rhineland, had to reduce their army to just 100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it didn't have, and a new rule was established that every Englishman withheld the right to walk into the center of Berlin, pick out any German they wanted, and spank the hell out of them. I made that last one up, but it helps you understand how all of this felt to Germans. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that when a small angry man with a silly mustache came along and said that he could fix everything, the German people loved it. Hitler had been a soldier during World War I, and he was crazy patriotic, and nobody was madder than him about Germany's humiliation. He helped start a new political party, and in 1923 attempted...
You know what? I love Germany too. Been there a couple times. It's an amazing place. I would not have done this though. Now, probably because I might be on the high side of it, because I know what happens between 1930s and 40s, right? And I didn't live through the Great Depression and stuff. So I don't understand the eating one apple a day that cost 43 million Reichmarks or something crazy like that.
With his boys. And then he got arrested. But his popularity grew and grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destined savior, and he went full megalomaniac, establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had fascist dictator number 2. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas, but more importantly, they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be friends? Franco? No? You good? I do. Who's that? It's Japan, and they've taken over northern China. Let's rewind a bit. Japan had isolated itself from the rest of the world for over 200 years until the Americans showed up and said, you're going to trade with us and you're going to like it. Then the Western powers imposed a bunch.
Americans always getting involved with stuff. Of course, you know. And see, in Japan's case, they could have been like, okay, well, since we opened up to the world because America's forcing us to, and the Dutch, by the way, can't leave the Dutch out of that. They could have traded with the Philippines, and well, this is probably what, 1880s, 1890s. I think that's when that happened. So Philippines, the Spanish still had it. So you could have traded with the Spaniards through the Philippines. Got relationships with Taiwan. That was still probably part of China though at the time. Got friendly with Australia and Indonesia, which you could have had the best trading routes there and conquer the world economically. But they decided to go to war anyways.
Bunch of unequal treaties, meaning Japan's economy was bust.
Now they were definitely bullied because China was being split apart by the West as well.
They also had no natural resources, so they decided to go get some. They went to war with China to gain a sphere of influence over Korea, and they took a bunch of China's stuff. But then the West said, hey, cut that out. And since Japan couldn't take on the West, they said, okay, I guess we'll just go home. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Taking advantage of a weakened China and setting up spheres of influence. But I was the one who weakened them. We know. And you guys didn't let me have anything. We know. That seems unfair. We don't think so. Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia, and then in an instant...
Hold on. Here's a little better map. So, like, since you took the islands over, you can, trading route. Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Vietnam, Thailand. That might not be Cambodia. That's Myanmar. Is that how you say that? Myanmar, and then Australia down there.
Incident that was maybe staged by the Japanese army, a bomb blew up a Japanese train in Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion and take over. So here's the situation. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan all believe they're racially superior, all feel hostility towards the Allies, and all want to militarize and take over more stuff. And so they did. Let's start with Germany. Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles, and now he was ready to begin undoing it. In complete violation of the treaty, the first Luftwaffe squadrons were set up, conscription was introduced, and he pimped up his army. The Allies did nothing. Then Hitler sent his army back into the demilitarized Rhineland, giving orders to immediately retreat if the Allies showed up. The Allies did nothing. With his military re-strengthened, he could now move on to step 2. He wanted to rapidly increase the Aryan population, and to do so, he needed Lebensraum, or in other words, he would have to take over the world. But for now, a good portion of Europe would do, and he began eyeing up his neighbors. The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little something like this. Hitler would say, I want that thing, and the Allies would say, you can't have that thing. Okay, you can have that thing, but no more. I want that thing. And repeat. In 1938, Hitler's army marched into Austria and just took it, with no resistance. Boom, this is Germany now. Next, he demanded to be given the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia with many ethnic Germans. The Allies held a meeting with Hitler in Munich and said, look, we're going to give you what... Hang on, this meeting is about my territory. Shouldn't I come to the meeting too? Anyway, we're going to give you what you want.
And I think that was a problem of the West, because they thought they freaking owned everybody. Yeah, because British at the time, I think the British before World War II started, they had 25% of the world. And my cat is walking in front of the camera. And so they thought they were completely invincible. And then they just like acted like each country was not anything. They didn't recognize, I wouldn't say salvation, that's not, sovereign countries, because the British and French really thought they were just unstoppable. They were kings of the world, they thought, but it just really soured relationships when the country being invaded can't go to their own meeting about their own territory.
Really? Yeah. Just like that? Yep. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving his signed piece of paper in the air, declaring crisis to be averted and the continuation of world peace. And we built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor, and every day on the 30th of September we celebrate Chamberlain Day. Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. What? He's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. Oh. You lied to me. What do you expect? I'm Hitler. Not to be outdone, Mussolini also wanted to get in on the action. He thought to himself, isn't there a not yet colonized nation somewhere which is so underdeveloped that the people would be defending themselves against our tanks with literal bows and arrows and wooden spears? Oh, there is? Fantastic. And so he took it. Italy also wanted to control the entrance to the Adriatic Sea, so they occupied Albania. Then, in another incident which was maybe staged by the Japanese, gunfire was exchanged by Japanese and Chinese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge, and the Japanese launched yet another invasion against China. They swept through Beijing and Shanghai, and then advanced through the Yangtze Valley to China's then capital, Nanking. It was here that saw the worst of Japan's shocking atrocities committed against the Chinese people.
Disgusting.
Back in Europe, Germany and Italy made their relation...
Hold on, Oversimplified. Let's not skip over that. Now, I think the reason why Japan had such an easy time going through China is because China was already split during the Civil War. Like, they were already weakened at that point. Like, morale, resources were getting thin. But that's a time where the Communist Party of China and the, I'm not quite sure what the other party was, but that was a time where I think like 10 years or 6-7 years at that point, they came together to fight the Japanese, which is great. It should probably stayed like that afterward, but of course not. But I think that's the reason why Japan had such a easier time getting through China, because they were already fighting each other. So China was already weak. But the thing in Nanking is absolutely disgusting. I've seen pictures of it, and it's just horrifying.
Relationship status official by signing the Pact of Steel. Then Hitler turned his eyes towards Poland and the hated Polish corridor.
See this, the corridor right here. Why did they do that? Why did they do that? They knew this would piss Germany off, because you have to cross into another country to get to another part of your country. That's crazy. That would piss off anybody. Of course they would be angry about that. And that's just poking the bear for more freaking conflict. I don't know. This makes me really angry. This makes me really angry that the British did that. I understand that they didn't want Poland to be a landlocked country, but they could have, I don't know, there might be something that I don't understand about that, but I think that was just to tease Germany and doing stuff.
Or splitting Germany in two. At this point, the Allies really had to put their foot down. and they warned him that an invasion of Poland would mean war. Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts. So for now he made an alliance with Stalin, saying, how about we both invade Poland and split it between the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future. Sounds good. This new alliance stunned the West. On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two giants crashing down on them from either side. Then came a period known as the Phony War, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. The French had launched a small invasion into the Saarland, but they maintained mostly defensive positions, and after a while decided to just turn around and call it a day. Speaking of France, the French were still super proud of their victory in World War I, and they hadn't really moved on from it. They still used horses, they dispatched messages by motorbike instead of using radio. Orders from the commander-in-chief were usually pretty vague, and the troops were rarely inspected. They built a line of defenses along their German border, but didn't bother extending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And
yeah, because I think the reason why...
out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And
Alright, there we go. Yeah, I think the reason why they didn't do that is because Belgium's right here. And they're like, well, Belgium really stopped Germany in the First World War. And then they can't attack in the south because we have all the defenses there. So it's really kind of like they didn't need to because they already had Belgium here, and they already showed that Belgium really showed the French how awesome they are fighting. They're a lot stronger than the French and Germans and the British ever thought. But different times, different technologies, different tactics. Nothing can... You can do the same thing twice and the outcome will always be different. Sometimes, depending on what it is.
And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically. Instead of bombing raids, the RAF dropped propaganda leaflets over German cities, which won...
And you know what? I appreciate that Chamberlain was trying to be... trying to solve the problem without fighting. And that's great, but I think he really didn't understand the... Well, no, I don't think anybody really understood Hitler because I don't know. I think they didn't have the full understanding of a person like that we have nowadays, because it's been 85 years, 90 years now. But I do appreciate that he was doing that, but it's the economic problem that is driving this war into what it is.
Air Marshal said likely did nothing but provide the continent with toilet paper for the duration of the war. They also only sent 200,000 men to France, while the French had mobilized millions. Both Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat of the First World War, and so they wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible. So they turned their eyes north, towards Norway. Neutral Sweden was exporting iron ore to Germany through neutral Norway, so the Allies asked them if they could please stop exporting iron ore to Germany, but this request was refused. Then the Soviet Union attacked Finland, so the Allies said, how about we land troops in Norway and move them across Sweden to go help out your good pal Finland, and along the way maybe take control of all your airfields. But Norway and Sweden still said no. So the UK mined the waters around Norway to force any transport ships into international waters, and they also attacked a German tanker they found in the area. Hitler realized what the Allies were up to, and he quickly moved to secure his supply of iron ore. He launched an invasion through Denmark into Norway. The Allies rushed to land troops at key ports along the coast, but Germany had taken control of Norway's airfield, and their air superiority decided the fight. The Allies had to retreat. After this slightly embarrassing failure, Chamberlain resigned and was replaced with Winston Churchill, who had a slightly different approach to dealing with the Germans. Hitler's overall strategy was similar to Germany's First World War strategy. Attack France, defeat France, knocking out the UK in the process, then turn on the Soviet Union and win the war. During the phony war, the Allies had given Hitler time to prepare his forces. Now, he was ready to attack. The Allies had wanted to place troops in Belgium, but Belgium had refused, and in a move that surprised pretty much no one, Hitler launched an invasion to get around France's defenses. The Allies charged into Belgium at full speed to meet the German invasion head-on, and it looked like a repeat of the First World War was coming. But this time, Hitler had a trick up his sleeve. Blitzkrieg. As the Germans advanced, they sent thousands of refugees westward, slowing down the Allies. Then, to the south, the French had left the Ardennes, an area full of hills and forests, pretty under-defended because they thought it was naturally impenetrable, while the Germans were about
Normally
to
it would
penetrate it
be.
with everything they...
But panzers kind of can't be stopped by trees. And meth. Meth and panthers. You know, the usual.
They had. They smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions through and encircled the Allied armies at lightning speed. The best of the Allied forces were now trapped. The Germans squeezed in from all sides, taking out France's best armies and nearly wiping out the British too.
Could have won the... Germany could have literally won the war right there. It's crazy how close that was.
But they managed to...
And I think because of one decision that a German general didn't make allowed the British to get away. And with that, basically saved England.
to make a desperate last-minute escape at Dunkirk, with British civilian ships even making the perilous journey to bring their young men home. With most of the French forces depleted, the Germans breezed through, taking Paris, and France fell. What the Germans couldn't do in World War I, Hitler had done just like that. Hitler hoped that with the fall of France, the UK would also lose hope and sue for peace, but quite annoyingly, it didn't, and he needed to secure the Western Front, so he tried to force them into submission with mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that. First of all, just before France fell, Italy finally declared war on the Allies, making the UK's situation even worse. Next, instead of just occupying all of France, Hitler occupied the coastal areas for defense, but allowed France to continue its existence as a German puppet state. This way, it looked like the UK's old ally had decided to switch sides. Hitler also hoped that the UK wouldn't attack any of her old allies' navy bases or colonies in Africa, giving Hitler an extra line of defense to the south. But the UK made sure to respond to this by sailing down to France's navy base in Algeria and wrecking a bunch of ships. So have at it. Hitler then began laying down plans for an invasion of Great Britain. Before German troops could land on British soil, he would first need air and naval superiority across the Channel. Waves of German bombers came, while the completely outnumbered RAF worked bravely around the clock in an attempt to quell the German attacks. At first, the Luftwaffe targeted British ports and coastal facilities. Then it attacked RAF bases, crippling the RAF's ability to defend the nation. And it looked like Hitler's Great British Invasion was coming. But then, Churchill ordered a small, pretty insignificant bombing raid over Berlin. It didn't do much damage, but Hitler was furious, and he immediately ordered the Luftwaffe to refocus its attention.
Understand a massive megalomaniac ego. Anything to turn the dial by like a quarter of a millimeter. You could win the war because now the Luftwaffe is not targeting military stuff but civilians, and that builds up the army again, and now you kind of just ruined that chance of invasion. Just takes one little hair for a minute to make a egomaniac furious
Attacks on civilian targets
and make ton of mistakes doing it.
in London. Children were sent off to the countryside, away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent trips to air raid shelters became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF breathing space to reorganize, so Hitler kind of shot himself in the foot there. Just the foot for now. Finally, the Luftwaffe sent one massive all-out attack on London, and the RAF successfully repelled it, destroying many of the German aircraft and placing air superiority firmly in British hands. Hitler's invasion had to be postponed, but the bombing of British cities continued for some time.
Alright, so we'll do part 2, and I enjoyed talking into this and having a channel to just ramble about random history stuff. I might do some like fat electrician stories because he is a master of telling stories. And it's always fun to learn about like individual people's stories during wars like this. And the next video I'll tell you a little bit about my grandfather, because the second part is when he enters the scene, and kind of tell just a little bit of the story. I am still writing his book and stuff, getting all his letters and stuff and putting them in a book and getting his story out there, because I think it's important that people know his story. Everybody should know everybody's story in in the war. Like, even like the Japanese soldiers and the Chinese soldiers and the Russian soldiers and the German soldiers and the Italian soldiers and the people that fought in Africa and all the Africans that fought across the continent, and you know, even the people in Burma, like the Indians and Japanese fighting and the British fighting in Egypt, and you know, everybody, the Greece fighting. But telling the story is important. And even if this World War II becomes, you know, like, oh, that was 350 years ago, it doesn't matter. We need to be learning people's stories about this. And it really shows how much the world has come together after this war. But I'll save more of the ranting for the next video. So I'll see you in the next one.